So if you're shopping for a good-looking three-row midsize crossover, but you don't want to fit in with the rest of the crowd with the Grand Highlanders, the Grand Cherokees, the Tellurides, well, GMC has the answer to that. It's called the Acadia. The vehicle behind me is the 2025 model year. It was all new redesign for 2024, and in today's video we'll tell you everything you need to know about this vehicle and why it is a very compelling option for a three-row family hauler, with one caveat. Alright, so here we have the 2025 GMC Acadia, and this is actually the third generation of the vehicle. It came back all the way in the late 2000s. Now, if you guys don't know about the GMC brand in general, it kind of places itself a little bit more premium to Chevy and Buick. It's not quite Cadillac, but it's also not quite Chevy. And in fact, this vehicle shares its entire platform with the Chevy Traverse and the Buick Enclave. Now, what I personally like about this third generation is I feel like all of the different vehicles that share this platform all feel and look a little bit different. In the prior gens, yeah, the front and back might look a little bit different. The interior is slightly different. Whereas here, honestly, if I didn't tell you this shares the same platform as the Traverse, you probably wouldn't be able to tell. The exterior is entirely different from the Traverse I reviewed last summer, and the interior is even more different. We'll talk about that in just a minute. So I finally feel like GMC has separated itself from all of the other platform sharing they do to make it feel a little bit more premium, a little bit more bespoke. So you can have a variety of different exterior and interior designs sharing the same platform and sizing as some of the other vehicles within Chevy's lineup. So it really adds a lot of flexibility from a buyer standpoint. So let's kick off this review with the design. Now, I think it's particularly pretty striking. It's a really good looking vehicle. It's kind of an evolution of their prior generation designs and some of the stuff they've been integrating over the years, but I really like this front end. So you've got these full LED headlamps and daytime running lamps, and as you can see, the headlamp itself is actually pretty small. It's located just in this section, but the headlamp kind of curves into the body molding, and I'm surprised they kept the headlight up top because GMC and Chevy have been starting to integrate those down lower into the bumper, but I do like this style a lot. And then you got your fog lights located down here at the bottom. Now, one thing to point out in terms of exterior design here is this is the Denali trim level. Now, if you guys don't know about GMC Denalis, they're pretty much the most top of the line, most luxurious, most opulent trim levels within GMC's lineup. And kind of a signature to the Denali is a lot of chrome. So your entire front grille is chrome. You've got a lot of chrome accents on the side, which we'll point out in just a moment, but it's meant to be kind of, you know, super in your face, and I like it. I like the way that Denalis kind of differentiate themselves. You can tell that it's a Denali without actually seeing the badging. Now, there are three trim levels. You got the Elevation, which is the entry-level trim, the AT4, which is the off-road trim, and then Denali is top of the line. Now, down here, I do want to point out, you do have some active grille shutters along with your adaptive cruise control sensors, and a little bit more chrome along with your front parking sensors. But I don't know, let me know what you think down in the comments below. I think it's a particularly striking design. You got some bulges here in the hood, and I do like how it kind of flows into the windshield with that A-pillar. Now, coming across the side of the vehicle, again, some of the attributes here are because this is the Denali, so you've got chrome accents around the side, you got more aluminum, I would say, roof rails. Your side turn signals are integrated into the mirrors, and then you've got a little bit more chrome accents around the door handles. Now, I do like that they don't have pop-out door handles like a lot of vehicles are integrating. I just think traditional door handles are better. Now, talking about the wheels and tires, because this is the Denali, you have the larger 22-inch wheels. These are 275/45, and they do have a pretty good look to them. They're not quite chrome, which is probably good because that feels more kind of like a 2000s straight, but they are this more brushed aluminum, and I think it fits in with the style. Now, in case you guys are wondering about the exterior color here, it's called Downpour Metallic, and it is a really nice color. I like the metallic speck in it. I've seen these on the road driving around, and I think with the dark accents and the chrome, I think it looks really good. As we come across the rear end, you still get full LED tail lamps, and a lot of these things are standard, folks, and that's because GMC tends to include a lot of these things on their trim levels. That's why they're priced a little bit higher as compared to the kind of down market Chevy Traverses. But I do like this LED running strip with the turn signals. You have some blacked out pieces over here, so it's not completely chromed out like prior gen Denalis, but I do like that black strip that it extends from passenger to driver's side. You get your integrated spoiler, and then your windshield wiper is on the rear glass. As we come across the rear end quarter panel, you'll see there is some more chrome accents down here at the bottom. You've got dual exhaust ports on passenger and driver's side, along with some badging which says Acadia and GMC. Now, I also like how it looks from this corner. I think it just kind of looks more striking, and definitely a lot different than the Chevy Traverse. The Traverse kind of has this floating C-pillar design, and this looks completely different. So let me know if you like this over the Traverse or the new Buick Enclave, but I think they all have kind of their own special spark to them. One last thing to mention about the Denali package as we make our way to the driver's side is you do get a certain performance suspension with that Denali package. So it's not just a strictly aesthetic type of packaging. It also adds a little bit of more, performance handling. Now, as we come across to this side, let's talk about the length here. It's 203.9 inches long. So it's pretty much on par with all mid-size crossovers. It's not too big. It's not like the full-size Suburbans, but it's also not, less than 190 inches, which is kind of your compact crossover territory. In terms of height here, you're 71 inches tall and you're about 80 inches wide. Ground clearance, it's not that great. It's about 7.3 inches. All right, jumping under the hood of the Acadia, this is kind of where you'll start to see why in the intro I said there is a caveat to this vehicle. That really has to do with the powertrain. So what we have here is a 2.5 liter turbocharged 4-cylinder that produces 328 horsepower, 326 pound-feet of torque. This is the only engine option. You can no longer get the V6 that came on the prior gen, and currently there's no hybrid or electrified option. Now, in terms of performance, it does 0 to 60 in just about the high 6-second range. It's paired to an 8-speed automatic transmission, and you can get this in either front-wheel drive or option for about $2,000 extra, the all-wheel drive. If you choose the AT4 trim, since it's off-road oriented, that comes standard with all-wheel drive out of the gate. Now, in terms of fuel economy here, we're talking about 19 in the city, 24 on the highway for a combined 21. Your towing capacity is 5,000 pounds. Now, with a 5,000 pound towing capacity and a full, 3 rows filled up with people, is this engine really going to have enough oomph to be able to move that amount of weight? Well, we won't know that until we put, 100,000 miles on these vehicles going through those types of conditions. What I will say is when we get behind the wheel, I'll tell you more about my impressions about this particular engine and why I think it kind of misses the mark. All right, next up, let's jump on the inside and show off the beautiful interior of the Acadia. First, I do want to show you the keys. So this is your typical Chevy key. You got your lock, unlock, your button to open up your lift gate, your automatic start stop, and your panic button. Nothing too exciting here. I kind of wish they would update this and make it feel a little bit different than Chevy products, but nonetheless, it's nice to have the remote start located on the key itself. Now you do push this button to lock it, and then you can push it to unlock it as well. And let's show off this really beautiful interior. I'm not going to go to the level of gorgeous because I saved that for luxury brands, but I think this is pretty much anything you'd find in any luxury vehicle. And it kind of asks for it given the price point. We'll talk about that in just a minute. So all of this is soft touch material. It's kind of got this more, rubberized kind of cowhide, but this is definitely a more premium type of material than just your typical one that you find like my Dodge Challenger. This is kind of a leatherette material. This is also all leatherette. I do like this, stitching, and this actually feels real. This isn't just, painted on or anything like that. There's some texture to it. Stitching is nice. I do like the premium Bose Performance Series audio system. This is actually a 16 speaker setup. The standard is 12 speaker, but this one being the Denali, you got it, top of the line. I do like this open pore wood as well, and it just feels really nice and textured. I believe this is real wood. You've also got this additional chrome along with some ambient lighting kind of baked into this little strip over here. So lots of designs. You can see there's more quilting and stitching located over here. You have your typical GMC badging, your memory seats, and your lock and unlock as well. But all of this is really nice. The one nitpick is this is hard touch plastic, so it fits in with everything because of the color, but you're not really going to touch that any day. Same with here. This is all hard touch plastic as well, where you have your little storage compartment, water bottle slot, and your power lift gate, which by the way, the power lift gate is standard on all trim levels. I do like how the speaker grill here is also white. It kind of blends in, but you also have a little bit more chrome. Just a very well designed interior. Now, talking about these seats, same type of design carries over. You do have some contrast stitching over here. They're perforated. These are heated and ventilated. Heated seats are standard along with a heated steering wheel. Now, if you want to upgrade to some of the higher trim levels, you're going to get heated seats in the second row as well. I do like how it says Denali over here. Again, more of this kind of quilted material. It just makes it feel very premium. I do like this brown color. It almost looks black on screen, but this is all kind of a dark brown. In terms of the coloration here, this is called Leather Sheer / Dark Atmosphere. So really cool names here, with that exterior, you know, being that downpour color, and then the interior having this cool color as well. I do like the floor mats. You got the Denali over there. I personally wouldn't pick this white color for the floor mats just because they're going to get dirty, so I'd probably put some all-weather rubber ones in there instead. But nonetheless, it does look nice, especially when you have it as a press car. Taking a look on the passenger side, it's just very bright and airy with this interior, and you know, on the roof as well, a panoramic sunroof on this Denali trim level. That's not standard on all trim levels. It's just one of the first impressions I got when I stepped into this vehicle was this is a very bright and airy and pretty looking interior. All right, now that we're in the driver's seat, let's talk about what's going on the dashboard. Again, just a very nice design over here. You've kind of got this two-tier setup where you've got the, you know, top part of the dashboard with a little bit of a design on the speaker grill back here, and then it kind of lowers down. It's even got some design located over here with some brushed aluminum, and this is kind of a second tier. It looks different, a lot different than the Traverse, which kind of had this one giant screen panel over here. So check out that review if you guys hadn't seen it on the channel. So starting off on the left-hand side of the steering wheel, you've got your vent controls over here, a little bit more chrome. This is the button to activate your electronic parking brake. You go through your drive modes, auto start stop. You can permanently turn on all-wheel drive, and of course your brightness indicator for the gauge cluster. And then moving towards the steering wheel, this is a brown leather wrap steering wheel. Like I said, heating is standard. You kind of got a little more rubberized material over here. And then instead of GMC, it says Denali because this is kind of its own brand, so to speak, within GMC's lineup. Now, on the left-hand side of the steering wheel, this is how you're going to control a lot of your adaptive cruise control functionality. And then you can also turn on your low range, where you can kind of manually, grind through the different gears using the paddle shifters on the back. But this is where you can set the distance, you can turn on the cruise control, and then this is where you can turn on Super Cruise. So this is an optional feature my particular tester comes with, and that's why it has this kind of glass panel over here with the lights. At least that's what it looks like to the viewers that see it on camera. In person, obviously, you don't see any type of lights. That's just the frame rate of the camera itself. But these sensors are what allows you to do hands-free driving on the freeway, and we'll show that off when we get on the freeway later on in the video. It's very, very impressive. On the right-hand side, this is how you're going to control your typical audio settings, your heated steering wheel over here. Then you can go through your menu buttons on your 11-inch gauge cluster display, which we'll turn on in just a moment. Like I said, there's paddle shifters over here. There's also buttons in true GM fashion on the back to regulate your volume and your seek and track settings. And then a couple of complaints here. So one is this is your gear selector stock, which is fine, but it feels a little bit on the flimsier side. I kind of wish it had a little bit more heft to it. Very similar to some of the other GM products I've reviewed. And then on the left-hand side, this is your windshield wiper stock and your high beams. If you really want to turn the headlights on and off, you actually have to activate it using the touchscreen over here. So this is something GM and Chevy have been doing for the last couple years, but for the most part, people are probably going to keep it in auto mode. But it is kind of odd that they didn't have a selector stock or any type of switch gear to be able to do that. You have to use the screen. Now, talking about this main display over here, let me turn the vehicle on. You've got push to start, of course, as standard. And turning this vehicle on, you do get this cool display. It doesn't show it because the vehicle was on just a moment ago. But this is an 11-inch display, and it's standard on all trim levels, and you can cycle through various different things. So as you saw, there was a full screen navigation. You can also turn on your Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. So that is a nice feature here where if you're navigating using your wireless connectivity, whether that's Android Auto or Apple CarPlay, it will show up on the screen here. So unlike some other competitors, it's not just going to show you like a Waze app. It's actually going to show you how to drive there. So you got your own built-in navigation, and then you've got your phone's navigation. You kind of have this screen where you see your driver's assistance features. You can do kind of a more centered speedometer, gauge cluster, and then you can go back to your map. So not super customizable, but I do love the fact that you can do a full screen navigation. Just makes it easier to be able to navigate around rather than having to look at the center screen. But there's also a head-up display on this particular model, and so that also will show you exactly how many miles until you need to make a turn or something like that. I do want to briefly talk about the material quality here. So aside from more speaker grills back there, part of your 16-speaker audio system, this is all soft touch material. It's nice and leather wrapped. You get some more, I think this is genuine stitching. It might be faux stitching, but it does look really nice. And then everything on top of the dash over here is also nice soft touch material. Really, the only place where you have hard touch plastics is along the back over there. And then oddly enough, your A-pillar is hard touch plastic. So that's a little bit of a nitpick I don't get why they didn't just use this cloth material and take it all the way down. This is something I usually see in more budget vehicles, and it's kind of odd for a vehicle of this price point, but I do like that speaker grill over there in the corner. And then a little bit of hard touch plastics located around the vents, but you're never going to touch that stuff. Everywhere else you touch is soft touch material, so very impressive. Now, I do like this open pore wood. Like I said, there is ambient lighting. I'll try to throw up some footage of this vehicle at night. It's not anything crazy. It's not a Mercedes-Benz, but it is nice because I don't think the second generation had any ambient lighting. Now, let's talk about the screen over here. It is a 15-inch diagonal display and totally different in terms of proportions and sizing as compared to the Traverse and the Enclave. I really like how this looks. It's kind of a, old school Model S type of theme to it, but I do like that it is vertical. It just makes it feel a little bit different. And that way, depending on what kind of style you like, there's an option within General Motors lineup for that. So the air vents are located on the left and the right-hand side. And this runs the same software you find on all the other ones. So it's really no different. It's just this orientation is a little bit different. You do have a power button located over here that will shut off and on the music. And then talking about this, obviously Apple CarPlay, Android Auto. Google is built in, so you can ask it questions like a smart home device by just saying, "Hey Google, what day is Easter?"
Sorry, I don't understand.
Yeah, it doesn't work seamlessly or flawlessly. But in any case, a couple things to point out here. You do have a 360-degree camera. GM has always got really good cameras. You got a bunch of different angles, different sections that you want to look at. You don't have any type of 360 camera, but honestly, every time I use that, it's more so to show off to my friends than anything else. You do have ambient lighting, like I mentioned earlier. You've got about 26 different colors and different brightness you can go through. It's very easily accessible. Your quick access buttons are located up here at the top. So you got your home button, you got your main menu button where you kind of have this widget style with your built-in navigation, and then your audio or whatever you want. You can kind of customize it. You can go straight to your audio, and then of course you can go straight to your navigation that's built into the vehicle as well. Another last few things to point out here, you do have your park assist where this vehicle will automatically park itself. And then last thing is your control. So this is kind of your quick access buttons where you can turn on your auto high beam, you can turn on your fog lights, you can do the dome lights, etc., etc. But you can also access it from down here as well, just like I showed you where you can turn on your headlights. You can access that quick access bar. And then some more safety features down here. Now your climate controls are always baked into this bottom section. I do like that they have this kind of switch gear here, so you can turn on your auto. You can cycle through your dual zone climate control using these switches, and these are nice. They're rubberized. They feel kind of, very hefty, kind of luxurious or brawny, I guess is the better way to describe it. And then you have your fan speed located front and center. Now, this is a cool little button over here. It kind of reminds me of the Mustang Mach-E, but it's your volume is essentially fused onto the screen itself, and it feels pretty nice. It's not like super premium feeling, but it's fine. It's acceptable. You can also go to your rear settings. That's where you can obviously regulate your 3-zone climate control, which is standard on this vehicle, which is to be expected for a 3-row crossover. Then you can go through your settings, and obviously there's a bunch of different things you can customize. But I gotta say, GM software is probably one of my favorites. It's snappy, it's very easy to understand and use. There's not a huge learning curve, and I like that Google is built in. It just adds to the kind of flexibility and usefulness. Now, moving down below that, I do like a little bit more of this open pore wood. Just kind of feels really nice. And opening up this compartment, you've got a wireless charging pad that works decently well. My phone still kind of slides around a little bit, but I do like they've included that. And then a little storage compartment with some 2 USB ports located down here. You do have your 2 cup holder slot, and then this is kind of a 2-tier setup where you've got more space down here to throw your purse or your wallet or what have you. This is all kind of a harder touch material, but it is wrapped in leather. And I do like how it kind of slowly covers up. Now, coming back to the center arm console, it is pretty soft touch. Opening it up, you got a 2-tier compartment where it's a pretty deep storage compartment to store a bunch of different things, and then you can kind of put some knickknacks up there. Over onto the passenger side, you got your damped glove compartment. It's pretty large. And then up above you, you've got your digital rear view camera mirror, which is included on the Super Cruise option. And then some quick access buttons for your SOS. And then you do have a sunshade, of course, for your large panoramic sunroof, along with a little sunglass holder. And the sunroof is nice and airy. It does make the interior feel even brighter, especially with this white interior. But that finishes off the first row. Let's jump into the second row and the third row, which you're probably going to use pretty often. All right, jumping into the second row, one thing this vehicle does really well is roominess for a mid-size crossover. Usually this type of space is reserved for kind of full-size territory, but you get the footprint of a pretty decently small crossover relative to other vehicles. Now, this is all soft touch material. You got more of your Bose premium audio system. Same materials as the first row. In fact, in some ways, it's a little bit better, honestly. A very little hard touch plastic over here and over here. I do like they've removed the cup holder inside of the door because I feel like it just sloshes around if you ever have anything open or any type of open container. You got your window switches over here, more of your speaker row, and a pretty decently sized little storage compartment down there. Now, talking about these seats, they're just as nice as the first row. You still got some of that cool quilted material. No Denali up here, but you still get that brown with the white leather and the contrast stitching. Now, climbing into the second row, this seat is adjustable. You can, move it forward and backwards. This is in its backmost position, but at the same time, you're going to be compromising some of that third row legroom once we get back there. I'll talk about that. Now, in terms of the space here, GMC says you got about 41.5 inches of legroom behind the first row, but this is gobs of space. Honestly, normally I'd probably sit somewhere around here, still get a decent amount of legroom, but you got more space in the third row. You got 2 cup holders located over here. You got your own set of climate controls, single zone for the second row, of course, and then you got heated seats back here. Like I said, that is an optional feature on the higher trim levels. You also got a household power outlet, which is a really welcome feature. I feel like more cars need to integrate this, but they just don't. You also got 2 USB ports back here, and then a pretty large storage compartment where you can throw your wallet or something like that back there. Now, the particular vehicle I'm sitting in is the captain's chair setup. If you choose the elevation trim level, that's the only one where you can get bench seating, which means you really only have one trim level that has seating for 8 passengers. Yes, you can fit 3 people back there, although I personally wouldn't recommend it. But in either case, this 7-passenger captain's chair configuration is really the only option you can get on the AT4 and the Denali trim levels. But I do like the captain's chair setup. Makes it easier to get in and out of the third row. Speaking of which, let me show you how to get into the third row. There's about 2 ways to do it. So first you can flip this, then you can push this button, and it kind of slides forward, giving you pretty decent access into the third row. But I have a feeling the majority of you are going to be using the other single action button, which is this button over here. You hold it down, the entire seat moves forward. Now, given the positioning here, you can still keep a car seat in this seat and still have access into the third row. And I gotta say, this is probably one of the best accesses into the third row that I've seen amongst the competition. Even from the full-size territory space, this is plenty of space back here. In fact, the Traverse platform has always been a little bit kinder to third row occupants. You generally have a little bit more space back here because it's a little bit of a longer vehicle than some of the competition. In terms of the sizing here, Chevy says you got about 32 inches of legroom behind that second row. And I gotta say, it's tight. This is a mid-size crossover, not full size, so obviously you're not gonna have as much room back here, but it's better than some of the competition. I've sat in the third row of the Telluride, the Infiniti QX60, and I gotta say, this feels a little bit more spacious. It could have to do with the fact that everything's kind of bright and white, makes it feel airier. But even though my knees are touching the seat over here, it doesn't feel as cramped as some other vehicles I've sat in their third row. And in terms of the angle here, I can't say my knees are like attached to my chest. It's not terrible. At the same time, moving this second row a little bit more forward where you still have pretty decent space over there, now I've actually got plenty of room back here. This is almost rivaling full-size territory. So really one of the biggest third rows in a mid-size crossover. In terms of amenities back here, you got a little air vent located up top. It's the same airflow as that second row. Vent controls, plenty of headroom. In fact, it kind of caves up a little bit because your panoramic sunroof is in front of you, where you kind of have this angle in front. I will nitpick the fact that this is hard touch plastic, as it always is in 3-row crossovers. You do have a little power outlet located over here, a little storage compartment, and a cup holder slot. And other than that, honestly, I was joking about the fact that you probably shouldn't fit 3 people back here, but if I kind of get a little bit tighter on my side, onto the driver's side, you could probably fit a third individual located here in the middle, maybe a teen or a little smaller child. But I think it's actually not that bad, all things considered. So I'm impressed with the third row here. The only nitpick is, maybe some soft touch materials on the door. Also, getting out is pretty easy. You push this button, the entire seat moves forward, and again, just plenty of space to get out. All right, now jumping into the trunk area, again, one of the larger ones of the mid-size space. You get about 23 cubic feet of space behind that third row, a really decent amount. You could easily put a little bit of carry-ons back here and still fill up the cabin with 7 passengers. Now, underneath here, a decent sized compartment for you to throw some valuables and kind of hide them out of plain sight. You got some hooks on the left and the right-hand side. You also have a little cigarette style power outlet. And what I do like here is you have electronic releases for your raising and lowering of the third row. So I can push this button and it will lower, and then I can push that button up and it will raise this seat back up. Now you do have to hold the button down, otherwise it's gonna stop, but that is impressive. Not all vehicles offer that. Now for the second row, it only allows you to lower it. You can't raise it back up, but still from the trunk area, you can lower that second and third row to be able to load large items in the back without actually having to climb into the passenger compartment. Now, if you do fold down the third row, you get a whopping 57.3 cubic feet of space behind the second row, and then folding down the second row, you get 97.5 cubic feet of space behind the first row. So plenty of space for large items. You can fit large pieces of plywood and stuff like that here in the trunk. All right, now in terms of warranty, there's nothing too impressive here. It's a standard 3-year, 36,000 mile bumper to bumper limited warranty, 5-year, 60,000 mile powertrain warranty, and GMC throws in the first maintenance as complimentary. Next, let's talk pricing. The starting price of the elevation trim level is just around $41,000 before the $1,400 destination fee. Realistically, you're probably never going to find a $41,000 Acadia on the lot. Now, stepping up all the way to the Denali gets you a starting price of $54,100. Now, this particular vehicle behind me with the Super Cruise, the Denali package with the bigger wheels, the special paint job, after destination, this is $64,400. So it's getting there to the luxury territory in terms of price point, and I think it's becomes a little bit of a hard pill to swallow considering the powertrain. But next up, let's jump behind the wheel and tell you my driving impressions. Okay, so setting off in the GMC Acadia. Like I said, first impressions, interior of this thing is probably one of my favorite aspects of this vehicle. Exterior looks really good too, but the interior just feels really nice. I really recommend this color as long as you're careful about staining, etc., etc. So one of the things you'll notice, and you've probably already kind of noticed my complaint earlier in this video, is the powertrain. And the reason I say this is one of the first things you'll notice is because as you're accelerating, you're going to hear that engine pretty prominently, even at low speeds. And that's where I think this vehicle could use a little bit more work. Is the engine just isn't as refined as I'd like it to be, especially considering the price point here. But more on that when we're accelerating on the freeway. So you may have heard that. I mean, we got up to 30 miles per hour, but it's pretty intrusive into the cabin. Doesn't feel like the more premium version of the Traverse because it's kind of rough. Here we are about to drive over some train tracks though. And in typical newest generation Chevy GM products, it rides really well. GM does a fantastic job with ride quality, just feeling really refined and nice on the inside. And I gotta say, in terms of road noise, I've driven this on the freeway, it's perfectly fine. I really haven't noticed anything. It's not Cadillac levels of sound insulation, but it's pretty well insulated. Really, the only thing that really bugs me is the sound of the engine. It just kind of is there. No matter what I'm listening to, even with this performance audio system, it just finds a way to get into the cabin more so than any other sound outside of the vehicle. The engine start-stop system also works pretty well. It's not as smooth as some other GM products I've experienced, but it's good. And you can shut it off, of course, with the buttons next to the steering wheel. Coming back to the ride quality, here we are driving over some more manhole covers, and we have some pretty rough roads here in Utah, and it's a really nice and smooth ride. It's not as soft as some other products from GM I've experienced because I think this is a little bit of a lower profile tire at the 22-inch wheel. You've also got the performance suspension here, so I'd really have to compare it to just the standard elevation trim level. But it's great. They do a really good job. They're definitely, in terms of kind of more pedestrian vehicles, I'm talking non-luxury, GM is probably one of my favorite in terms of ride quality. And then as I switch lanes, one thing I complained about earlier was the gear selector stock feeling kind of cheap. Oddly enough, the turn signal stock and the wiper stock actually feels really nice. So I don't get why they didn't use that same type of, technology or mechanism for the gear selector stock. But this one just kind of feels straight out of, the Chevy Colorado, which I thought was a pretty cheap feeling vehicle in the Trail Boss trim that I reviewed. So you know, some things just feel like they are great and everything's really nice and premium and it's like, this is clearly a luxury car. Other things just feel like they could be a little bit better. So now that it's gotten a little bit darker, the ambient lighting inside the cabin is turned on and I like it. It's a nice touch. I didn't expect this vehicle to have it, but it's nice that you can adjust it and have fun with it. I'm a sucker for that stuff. So here we are about to enter onto the freeway. So I'm gonna put it into sport mode. We're not going to be at a dead stop. We're going to go down to about 20 and I'm gunning it. And we're at 60, 70 miles per hour. So in terms of acceleration, that wasn't that bad. It was actually pretty peppy. You know, the 328 horsepower is believable. It's not necessarily the power that's my issue with this powertrain, it's the noise. It kind of always feels like it's pushing it a little bit, like it's just not, you know, it's not as refined. And that's what I keep coming back to, is it's not as refined. When I experience this powertrain in the Traverse, it's maybe a little bit more acceptable because it's not the upmarket vehicle. It doesn't have the same price tag as this vehicle. But to me, this almost reminds me of the powertrain inside of the Chevy Trax that I reviewed about 6 months ago. Obviously it's not, because that's a 3-cylinder engine. This is a turbocharged 4, but in either case it almost has that same type of almost roughness to it, and I just don't like that. I wish it felt more refined. I would have hoped that they would have done a hybrid or a V6 for the GMC version. So keep the 4-cylinder on the Traverse, but since you're paying, you know, upwards of $60,000 for one of these vehicles, give it a more premium platform. That's my one nitpick. It's not a bad powertrain by any means. Plenty of get up, like, you know, the turbo lag is a little bit more noticeable at lower speeds, but here on the freeway, it does a great job in terms of passing power. No complaints there. It's really just the experience behind the wheel. Now, I do want to point out one of my favorite features with this vehicle is the lighting here is terrible, so apologies about that. But one of my favorite features, which I've actually never experienced before in a product, is Super Cruise. So Chevy's Super Cruise system, which you activate by pushing the button on the steering wheel, it is the best system I've experienced in terms of hands-free driving. You simply click the button and it works really well and very consistently. So I did experience the Nissan Pro Pilot Assist 2.1, and it's essentially the same system, but it just wouldn't work very often. It would be on and off, maybe it would last 30 seconds, then it would shut off. This thing, earlier today, it was on for probably a good 20 minutes, and it did a really good job. And it's kind of eerie to take your hands off the steering wheel and just trust this vehicle is doing things right, but it does a really good job. It doesn't hunt between the lanes, and you know, I've heard that Super Cruise is a great system. Now experiencing it, I 100% agree with what everybody has said about Super Cruise system. It's fantastic, and the fact that, you know, Mercedes doesn't have this in its regular cars is mind-boggling. I mean, you know, I've driven the latest generation S-Class and it had nearly hands-free driving, but you still had to have your hand on the steering wheel. This thing, you actually don't. And I like the light indicator over here on the steering wheel showing me that it's green, it's activated, and it'll do automatic lane changes when the vehicle in front of me is slow, or by me simply tapping on the blinker, this thing will change lanes for me. I've never felt like it's about to crash into the vehicle to the left or right of me. I mean, this is a perfect video to do vlogging and just have the car drive itself. Really good system, and this alone is worth, you know, its weight in gold. I mean, the fact that you can take a road trip and just kind of take your hands off the steering wheel is phenomenal. And they offer this on all the trim levels. So I'd recommend getting Super Cruise no matter what trim level you get. But, you know, in terms of driving impressions, to wrap it up, I like it. Powertrain needs a little bit of work, refinement specifically, but it's a great daily driver. I mean, somebody who owns this vehicle isn't going to have any issues with it. It does everything well. It has still a 5,000-pound towing capacity, plenty of room on the inside, really nice features, technology, the colors. GMC did a good job on this thing, and I think you'd be happy owning one of these vehicles. But let's finish off my overall thoughts back in the parking lot, so I'll meet you there in just a moment. All right, so to finish off this video, what are my overall thoughts and recommendations on the GMC Acadia? Well, as you can tell, there's some big positives here. for one, it looks really handsome and nice. It looks like something that you'd see, you know, as a future vehicle in like a 90s Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. It's pretty brawny, pretty cool looking. It also has an extremely spacious third row. So if you're carrying third row passengers very often, but you don't want to step up to the large footprint of a full-size SUV, this is probably the best option out there, unless you want to go for one of its siblings like the Chevy Traverse or the Buick Enclave. It also has a really nice interior, great technology with that Google-based operating system. The couple nitpicks I have is the fact that the powertrain here does not necessarily line up with a $64,000 vehicle. I feel like at that price point, you should have some sort of hybrid technology or a V6 to be able to propel this thing a little bit more confidently. I also think some materials on the inside, like the gear selector stock, the A-pillar, those things that feel a little bit cheaper than a $64,000 vehicle. If it was my recommendation with my money, I would probably stick to the AT4 trim level. That's kind of the mid-tier trim. Try to keep it a little bit on the lower end in the, you know, low to mid $50,000 range. Get Super Cruise because it's fantastic, and then you get yourself a pretty compelling bargain. At 55 grand, you're a little bit more premium than some of the, you know, price points of the competition, but you have something a little bit more unique because you just don't see one of these every day on the road. But what are your thoughts on the GMC Acadia? Would you take this over the, you know, over a dozen of different competitions on the road today, or would you pick some of the competition? Let me know down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for all of the weekly videos. Also check me out on all the social media, same as the YouTube channel name. Till next time, everybody, hope you stay Schwazy, stay healthy, have a wonderful day.